Hello, beloved, and welcome back to the podcast. If we haven't met before, my name is Courtney Louie, and around here we spend a lot of time talking about self-awareness, our God-given gifts, and how understanding yourself can change how you live, lead, contribute, and live your life. Today's episode is a little bit different because it's part of something I've started calling a connection call. Connection calls are intended to be short, focused conversations to support you with gaining clarity around one meaningful attention, see it from a fresh perspective, and take a step forward that you're actually excited about. The goal isn't to teach everything, it is to help you see one thing more clearly than you did before you arrived. And over the past few weeks on our podcast, we've been talking about what feeling behind, understanding our capacity, and recognizing when we're trying to force rhythms that don't fit our lives. But today, I want to slow down and talk about something underneath all of those conversations. A question I've been sitting with lately came from a survey response. Earlier, I'd asked women in this community, the Tribe Beloved community, what they were wrestling with. And one response really struck me. She said, I need to remember my worth when nothing is going my way. Ugh. Raise your hand if you can resonate with that, because it's so easy, right? When it feels like everything is falling apart, or when life is harder than expected, or when the routine doesn't seem to be working, or the list goes on, the plans aren't unfolding the way you hope they would, or people, your kids, your spouse, your community needing more than you had expected. It starts to feel so heavy, and you can start to beat yourself up wondering, why am I struggling so much? And the thing is, you're likely carrying responsibilities that others are not even aware of, or to be honest, you may not be aware of them because sometimes you just haven't taken the time to name it. You're trying to show up well, and sometimes it still feels like you're coming up short. And that question pops up, or really a bunch of questions. You might find yourself starting to ask, why am I struggling so much? Why can't I seem to figure this out? Why is this so frustrating? Why does it seem like everyone else can handle this way better than I can? And before long, those questions aren't really about the circumstance anymore. It's about you. You start wondering if the problem is you. I always think about Taylor Swift. Hey, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. Sometimes that song hits a little bit harder. I don't remember all the lyrics, but we're going to go with it. And something I've noticed I find really interesting is many of us tend to follow a pattern that can look a bit like this. Something feels hard. We feel frustrated, understandably. Then we tell ourselves, I should be handling this better, which quickly becomes, what's wrong with me? And before we realize it, we're carrying shame instead of information. We're treating that experience as evidence that we're failing. But what if we're skipping an important step? What if, instead of immediately asking, what's wrong with me, we pause and ask, what's actually going on here? For myself, that question has been so helpful, not because it magically solves everything, but because it helps me move from beating myself up to getting curious, to starting to look at it as data rather than definitions about who I am. So I'm going to give you a recent example. So lately, during my children's bath time, I've been experimenting. We're at this beautiful stage where both boys can bathe together, and I also don't feel good about leaving my toddler alone in the tub, obviously. So, I'm committed with the bath time. After they get all washed up, we drain the dirty water, and then it's just playtime. Sometimes they rotate in different things to, like, we get bubbles, or we might use water beads, or food coloring, or, we got water crayons. And then they also think it's fun to clean the walls, so win-win. But they're rocking out, splashing in the tub, and I've been trying different ways to use that time since I'm kind of held captive, and I've been using it as a gift. You're occupied. Why not occupy myself with something I really want to do? So sometimes I'll do Pilates or a workout video, which, by the way, I totally filter workout videos based off, can this fit into my bathroom? And it's awkward enough. It's eliminated quite a few options. Sometimes I'll read a book, and for the most part, I've noticed those things tend to go pretty well. But I noticed something interesting, and at the time, really, really frustrating. Whenever I tried to use that bath time to do computer work, everything seemed to unravel. The kids would start pushing boundaries. Water would get poured on the outside of the tub, something we don't do. They would start doing those big splashes that, kind of explode. That's also something we're not a fan of that. It's a boundary line we have. The faucet, turning it on and off, gets really exciting, which not the end of the world, but side note, it's also where I live in Arizona, the water gets hot really quickly. And our toddler hasn't, quite learned how hot to not turn it to. But all these different things would start happening. They'd start giggling and laughing about it and looking at me like, what you gonna do? And obviously the energy in the room shifted. And I'd tell them that's a two, that's a what, whatever the warning system is I have. But the energy would shift and I would get so frustrated. Now, I could have told myself a story, which let's be honest, I actually did for a while. There's a reason we're talking about this. I would think I'm not patient enough. I'm failing. I should be kinder. I should be handling this better. I should be prompt about shutting things down immediately. But then I started taking a moment back and considering what is this data? I don't have to take it personally. My reaction, obviously, but what can we do differently? And I noticed that this was not a one-time thing. This was a pattern. Every time I tried to divide my attention, for whatever reason, computer time was a thing, the same thing would happen. The frustration was real, but it was also information. It was data. And that distinction really matters because the frustration wasn't just something to judge. And actually, I wouldn't encourage judging it. It was something to notice and something to learn from. One of the things I'm learning is that our reactions often contain information. I mean, if you're a parent, you totally get that about your own children, likely are that way too. I mean, that's part of being human. But reactions contain information. They don't often contain the whole story. There's more going on. The world does not revolve around each of us individually as humans. But that information gives insight about what is going on. And the reaction may not be information about the whole story. I just said that, or necessarily the final answer, but it gives you data to work with. When we're feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, irritated, when we keep bumping into the same struggles, instead of making it mean something terrible about ourselves, we can get curious. We can take a pause and consider what's happening, what's contributing here, what keeps repeating. What's the pattern? Because sometimes what feels like a personal failure is actually revealing something important about our season, our environment, our expectations, rhythms, or our capacity. And if we don't pause long enough to notice it, we might miss the opportunity to learn from it. And by the way, I'm totally not judging you if you're in that boat. Like I was sharing, the bath time thing was actually, don't think I shared. It was going on for a few weeks. I was noticing there was a trend and finally realized, I need a shift. So sometimes it can all take a little time to, become aware of it. And this quick side note, this is really the heart behind connection calls, not teaching everything there is to know about a topic and not trying to give you a 10-step formula that's exhausting, but giving you the permission and the space to pause long enough to notice something you may not have noticed before and be kind to yourself about it. Because that clarity, that noticing often comes before change. And sometimes one small realization can still shift the way we approach an entire situation. Insight is empowering, right? And this is where compassion comes in. And I want to be absolutely clear. When I say compassion, I don't mean pretending everything is fine. That's ridiculous. We're not talking about lowering your expectations or making excuses or staying stuck. I mean approaching ourselves honestly without immediately attacking ourselves. Because if every observation becomes a personal attack, it's very hard to learn. If every struggle becomes proof that we're failing, it is so hard to grow. You're kind of chopping yourself down from the get-go. And the beautiful thing is compassion can create enough safety for being honest. And honesty creates opportunities for growth. I think that's one of the reasons Jesus's invitation feels so different from the pressure that many of us place in ourselves. He didn't begin with condemnation. He begins with truth and grace. And obviously, I think we're on the same page. We need both. Truth without grace often can become shame. And grace without truth doesn't always help us grow. But together, ooh, together, they create space for transformation. I'm sure this may be coming to mind for you. I'm thinking about Paul's words in Second Corinthians. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And I absolutely don't like being weak. Let's be absolutely, I mean, come on. I'd rather feel capable, competent, strong, prepared. But scripture repeatedly reminds us that weakness isn't disqualifying. It's not proof that we're failing, and it's not evidence that God is disappointed in you. Sometimes it's simply reality, and it's an amazing opportunity to notice that, hey, I need help here, and that's okay. When we stop fighting reality long enough to acknowledge it, that we're struggling here, this is a weakness, a pain point, what I'd like to call a limitation, we can begin responding more wisely. Not perfectly. I mean, life is a human experiment, right? But wisely. There are so many areas of life where I can honestly say I've experienced, or perhaps maybe actively experiencing, this is not who I want to be. I don't want to be as frustrated as I sometimes get. I don't want to be as reactive as sometimes my instincts are. And I don't want to keep repeating patterns that are not helpful for me, for those around me. Just no. But there's a big, big difference between saying, this is not who I want to be, and saying something is wrong with me. Those are not the same thing. One acknowledges a gap, the other assigns a verdict. One creates room for growth, and the other creates shame. And I think many women need permission to recognize the gap without turning themselves into the problem. So I'd love to leave you with three questions. First, where in your life are you feeling the most frustrated or defeated right now? Just name it. You may have multiple areas. That's okay too. I totally get that. Or maybe you don't have any. If so, rock on. I'm excited for you. Enjoy that stretch. Second, what's actually happening here? Walk through it. What tends to happen? What keeps repeating? What's the pattern? Sometimes you're just collecting the data. And then third, what's one small adjustment, experiment, or pivot that might support you better in the situation, in the season? You don't have to put pressure on it for it to fix everything. It doesn't have to solve every step. Just one next step, one experiment, one small shift. And actually, I'm going to give you one more story. So my eldest wears glasses. And let's see, I think it was the last 2.5 months or so, like the last 2 months of school and into summer, he got into a groove of routinely misplacing his glasses. And we would spend so much time searching the house trying to find the glasses. Like I've clocked it before. We would spend 15 minutes trying to find his glasses. So, we didn't get to have the playtime in the morning, or it was harder to get out the door. And it was frustrating. I mean, you've been there, that I kept doing this multiple days a week for months on end. Like, this is ridiculous. I was irritated. I was frazzled. I was short-tempered. My son was upset. My toddler was upset. It was just, oh, it's a terrible, terrible way to start your day. And I realized we had a problem. I also was thinking, like, what can we do? I do know we do really well with flexible structure. We do really well with routines. And maybe he just needs a home. Because I'd experimented with, like, let's put your glasses here or here when you take them off. And that wasn't very successful. But we decided, let's try something else. How about every night before you go to bed, your glasses go on your nightstand? That's it. In the day, they always go there. Now, the glasses still do get lost sometimes, but what I can say is mornings are not frazzledy because they have a home. Like in the morning, we start the day knowing where they are. And that's so simple. I know that this may not work indefinitely. Things will change, but for this season, it has been so supportive. And my hope is that for you, that might be just kind of like practical example of sometimes you just need a little tweak to support you. That doesn't have to be complicated and can create more peace. And letting yourself acknowledge this sucks. We can do differently. That could be so helpful. Maybe so that all brings us back to that idea of, yet again, we can struggle with finding our worth when things are not going our way. I know I felt like a crazy, bitter, irritable person every morning when we had to do the scavenger hunt. And I would spend time really upset in my car thinking about I don't want to be this person. And it was easy to look at it from that perspective of, oh, I should be different. This is not who I want to be. And for me, that was really helpful. And you might resonate with that, that maybe that's what remembering your worth looks like when nothing is going your way. It's not about pretending that everything is fine. You're not convincing yourself that hard things aren't hard. But remembering that difficult seasons, difficult moments, they're not a verdict. A frustrating moment is not a verdict on who you are. A struggle does not declare that you are broken. Their experiences, their information, and information can help us grow. We have to put it into action, but information is a good stepping block. Beloved, your worth does not disappear when life feels messy. It does not disappear when you're struggling or when you're learning or experimenting or adjusting or pivoting and trying again. You are still deeply loved by God. And maybe the invitation isn't to try harder, maybe it's just to pay attention, to notice, to get curious, and to approach yourself with enough compassion that you can learn from what this season, this moment is trying to teach you. As we wrap up this connection call, I hope one thing feels a little clearer than when we started. Maybe it's a pattern you've been noticing, or a frustration you've been carrying, or simply the realization that a hard season doesn't automatically mean that you're failing. Whatever it is, my hope is that this conversation, one-sided conversation this time, helped you pause long enough to see it with fresh eyes. And if it resonated, I would love to hear from you. What's something you've been wrestling with lately? An area where you've been feeling frustrated, discouraged, or stuck? Feel free to send me a message, reply to the email, or connect through the links in the show notes. And if you'd like support enjoying the patterns, gifts, and strengths that shape how you do life, I'd love to connect through a God-given gifts chat. I also wanted to name, before I get too far ahead of myself, one of the reasons I've been wanting to experiment with connection calls, future times, real people will be connecting, but we're experimenting, and that's what we do, is I want to create more opportunities to slow down, connect with real women, and explore the things that are showing up in your lives. So I'm here for you. And until next time, beloved, you are loved. So let's go live love and be love.